For those of you who are just joining us, we're taking a moment before we get started in just a minute and a half or so. Please introduce yourselves in the chat pod. Let us know your name, your position, and what part of the country you reside in, or what company you are representing today is too. I see a lot of my Goodwill friends here in the participant pod, so thank you so much for joining us. But I also want to give you guys a chance to let you know who we're going to be hearing from today in our quarterly thought leadership series. Today we'll be focusing on why fair chance hiring, and we'll be hearing from Drew Patterson, who's the owner of Basic Industries. We'll be hearing from Eric Wellinghoff, the Chief Marketing Officer at Nehemiah Manufacturing. And we'll also be hearing from Ken Oliver, who's the Executive Director of Checker.org. And we're going to get started in just under a minute here. We're going to let everyone get settled and make sure that the attendees have time to join us. While we're doing that, I'm sure most of you are seeing people starting to introduce themselves to the chat pod. So if you've just joined us and you haven't had the opportunity to yet, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat pod, name, organization you're representing, what your responsibilities are, or your job title. Also, let us know what part of the country you're coming from. We have a really great agenda today for you today, where we're going to be doing a deep dive into fair chance hiring. And it's just about that time. It's 1 o'clock now, so we'll give everyone just 30 more seconds to get their introductions in the chat pod. I want to say hello to Phyllis and Art, Rhonda, Ashley, Edwin. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out to join us for this conversation. And especially want to say thank you to our panelists today who are volunteering their time to help guide us through this conversation and share their experiences with fair chance hiring. So without further ado, it's 1 p.m. It's about time for us to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome to your screens Jason White. Jason is our chairman at the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative, and he's going to get us started today. Thank you, Jason, and I will see you all in just a bit.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate you and just welcoming everyone. So welcome everyone to the 6th session of our Thought Leadership series. I'm super excited for this session. We're going to be covering a great topic. If this is your first time, just so you know, our Thought Leadership series is really our way of facilitating continuous learning in the field, where every quarter we get together on one national platform to really share leading practices, strategies, and approaches that are really making an impact in the field. And our topic for today, as Jennifer mentioned, is why fair chance hiring. There's no better time for this to cover this topic because many companies are really struggling to fill vacancies that they have within their organization. And I'm sure many of us, if not all of us on this call, truly believe that there's an untapped labor force with people who are impacted by the justice system. As a matter of fact, there are over 70 million adult Americans who have a criminal record. And these persons are actually face a plethora of collateral consequences that really prevent them from finding viable employment. And matter of fact, historically, many companies have implemented policies that really deny the opportunity for persons to even apply in the first place. I am super excited today that we have 3 companies who are fair chance hiring companies. And I'm especially excited because not only do they practice fair chance hiring, but these companies actually have committed to advancing the movement and encourage other stakeholders to get involved in this work. So I'm super excited to be a part of this group today. So there's really a strong business case for fair chance hiring. And I would actually argue that we do have a moral obligation to move in this direction. So today our session will actually be hosted by Jennifer Lynch, who you met already. She's our thought leadership lead, and she's also the Reentry Services Director at Goodwill Industries International. Now, before I hand over to Jennifer, I do have two very important announcements that I'm super excited about. Can't wait to share these things with you. Now, if you are on our listserv, you may have received an announcement that we're launching our inaugural conference this year. Folks, we can't wait for October 19th to come. The conference will be from the 19th to the 21st at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Bethesda, Maryland. Bethesda is about 3 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And the theme for the conference is Building Connection for Change. Now, as the theme suggests, we will actually be elevating leading practices, but we're also creating spaces for attendees to network and build collaborative effort to go beyond the scope of the conference. So please visit our website, click on our conference link and register to join us in October. The second announcement that I would like to share that we're very excited about is we're launching our membership offering in July, which is next month. So next month, we will be opening membership to organizations, entities, and individuals who are really committed to moving the field forward. So we will be sending more information about that soon. So if you are not on our mailing list, please do sign up for that. You know, we have been on this journey, folks, for the past 4 years. And we would not have come this far without the collaborative effort of many organizations that are in this call. So I do want to share a heartfelt thank you for your faithful commitment to this journey. Thank you so much. And please do come out to our conference and sign up for a membership. Let's work together to move the field forward. Okay. Jennifer, it's my pleasure to hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. And I can tell you that my team is beyond excited to be attending the conference in October as well. So I hope to see all of you there in Bethesda with us. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get a better introduction to our panelists today. So today, what we will be focusing on, as you all know, is fair chance hiring. We have 3 different representatives from 3 different organizations of all different sizes and natures who are going to be speaking to their own experiences and best practices that they've come across as owner operators or even as people who can influence business. With us today is Drew Patterson. He's the owner of Basic Industries, and he operates an organization that works with their local correctional facility in doing pre-release and work release programming. We also have Eric Wellinghoff, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Nehemiah Manufacturing. And we have Ken Oliver, who's the Executive Director of Checker.org. I'm going to let them do a little bit more of an introduction of themselves. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Drew today. So Drew, if you don't mind joining us, we'll go ahead and get our introduction to you and Basic Industries, and then we'll move on with the rest of our agenda today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning from Colorado. My name is Drew Patterson. I'm the owner of Basic Industries. We are a wood component manufacturer or a lumber remanufacturer that focuses on kind of all the products that you would see, but you wouldn't really think of where they come from. We do a lot of wood stakes. We do a lot of frame strips, wedges, lath, that sort of thing. We've been in business since the fall of 2014, and pretty much immediately we knew that we had a process and a product that lent itself towards hiring people without specific job skills. So we wanted to, hire folks that were experiencing homelessness, or we wanted to, hire guys that were transitioning out of prison, maybe in a halfway house, that sort of thing. So we tried to do that on our own, but realized very quickly as a young startup without cash and without time and all those things, it was hard for us to figure out the best way to figure out those logistics and actually make that happen. We were located in northern Colorado, very rural part of northern Colorado at that time, and I was driving way too much. And so we were looking for a different landing spot for our business, for our family. And we decided to move to a small mountain town, Buena Vista, Colorado. And when I started talking to the economic development team, they said, hey, I don't know if you'd be interested, but there is a program starting up where you can hire guys that are coming out of the prison on a work release. And that kind of sealed the deal for us to move here. And we've been working with that program ever since. The nice thing for us is with limited resources and all of that, a lot of those logistics were taken care of. We're about a mile from the facility. So our guys get out every day. They can walk, ride their bikes. Sometimes we'll pick them up. Just kind of depends on the situation, how many of them are coming. But we have 11 employees, including myself right now. And 8 of those are coming from the Transitional Work Center over at the Buena Vista Correctional Facility. So in Take Two is a relatively new program here in Colorado. They basically put out an application to the DOC to be included in the program, and Department of Corrections will go through their application, see if they meet all the requirements for their mandatory release dates, their actual crime that they've been sentenced on, and they will go ahead and clear that through the sheriff's department here in town, and then they'll basically offer certain applications for us to look through as employers in the area, and we can set up interviews at that time, go through, interview them. And this is from any facility here in Colorado. And so if we decide to hire them, they'll transport them into the Transitional Work Center. Transitional Work Center is more dormitory style living. It's, they have the ability to get a gate pass for the day to go out, go grocery shopping. So they get $300 loaded onto a card. They have to budget that for their month. And so they really start to help kind of normalize normal living while they're in that program. And so during that time, we can hire them. We pay them, what we would pay anybody off of the street for the job that they're doing. And they can save that up, and they can pay off restitution. They can pay off child support during that time. And the hope is that they can walk away with a chunk of cash to, get a place to stay, get a car, and basically hit the streets, with a little bit of wind in their sail. So it's been really interesting for me being new to all of this over the last couple of years, and really starting to understand the challenges that these guys face. I think it's really easy for a lot of people to say, well, that's happening over there in the prison. That has nothing to do with me. And the reality is these guys are getting out, period. They're getting out at some point. So for us to be able to help them as a community, figure out what a budget looks like and all those things, figure out housing, man, the list is really long for the things that they struggle with when they get out. A lot of these guys struggle with housing right away, finding a job right away. A lot of them have fines that tie up their ID so they can't get a driver's license, transportation, family dynamics that might have even changed while they were incarcerated. All of those things, I mean, I take for granted all the things that I have, but man, they have like a list of things that they are fighting with day one when they get out, and they have almost no ability to affect those things while they're incarcerated. So it all piles on them, day one of release. And so this program's been awesome. We were able to help them with a lot of those things that they're going to be transitioning into. I have a hard time knowing the best way for us to grow as an organization or as a company. Do we grow and create programs and become bigger? Or do we stay small where I can, have pretty intimate touch into their lives? These guys come over for Thanksgiving and they hang out with my friends, and seeing those communities come together has been really special. And so that's the place I'm caught in right now as a small business. I love that personal touch on these guys' lives, and their touch on my life and my family's and my wife's. And so that's the struggle for us. But the nice thing is we really have, this has been a really good landing spot for me. I don't care in 30 years if we made X amount of money or X amount of wood products. I mean, this has been a good thing for me to think through. This is really where I want my business to go, is into helping people instead of just making products. So I appreciate you guys being a part of the conversation, and looking forward to hearing more from your chats.
And Drew, we look forward to hearing more from you a little bit later when we get into our panelist questions, but there are so many great things that you said in there that I don't even think that you're giving yourself full credit for doing in regards to like type of programming that community-based organizations do that you're incorporating into your business. And so for going the extra mile, I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you. And really look forward to engaging you in more conversation later. Thank you for that
Awesome.
introduction.
Thanks, Jennifer.
With that, we're going to go ahead and move and start speaking with Eric here. Eric's going to share a little bit about Nehemiah Manufacturing, and also, I'm not sure if he'll share this with you, but I'm going to go ahead and share it anyway. There's a great TEDx talk out there that Eric did that you guys can check out as well if you'd like to Google that. But Eric, do you mind going ahead and introducing yourself, your role at Nehemiah, and how Nehemiah engages in fair chance hiring?
Absolutely. And Jennifer and Jason and everybody, thanks for having me. My name is Eric Wellinghoff. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Nehemiah Manufacturing. So what is Nehemiah? We're a 14-year-old company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. And we were founded with the goal of bringing light-duty manufacturing into the urban core of Cincinnati. And this was happening at a time when there was a tremendous amount of gentrification happening in the urban core. So our founders really wanted to have jobs where folks could walk to work, to really enable folks not to have to leave their homes in the inner city of Cincinnati. So that's the background. The other piece is the name Nehemiah is actually based on the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. It's a prophet called by God to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, one stone, one brick at a time. And really, that's what we're trying to do here in Cincinnati. So I can't help but say a lot of what Drew was mentioning was where Nehemiah was several years ago. So we're a 14-year-old company. We are around $60 to $70 million in sales a year. We have over 200 family members. But all that started with a group of 5 people that really started a company and grew from one production line now to 10 plus production lines and now multiple facilities. So all of this can grow, but I'll tell you, 14 years ago, there wasn't really a lot of call to do this. So I want to tell you how we got here and really what the resources are out there for folks to benefit from that. So first of all, what do we do? Light duty manufacturing, what is that? The simplest way that I can discuss that, and I actually have a product here. So there's a product that we might make called the Tide Rescue Laundry Stain Remover. So if you get a stain on your shirt at lunch today, you can buy that product, you can spray it, and then you can put it in a washing machine and the stain will come out. That is, we don't own the Tide brand. That's owned by Procter & Gamble. Actually, I'm a Procter & Gamble alumnus, and many of us used to work at big CPGs. But what we do is partner with P&G, and we license their trademarks and their brands and then launch into categories that they're not playing in today. We make a Tide washing machine cleaner. We make brands under Febreze and Downy, things like that. So we do 3 things at Nehemiah. The thing I'm in charge of as Chief Marketing Officer is building brands. So we build brands to create jobs and to change lives. And if we don't grow those brands, I can't hire more people. We can't have 200 family members. So we've consistently grown our business year on year. And we are highly competitive in the consumer packaged goods industry, selling to Walmart, Target, Amazon, Kroger, you name it. And what I want to hit on is we were a for-profit company. I think a lot of times people think we're a nonprofit, and we think that's incredibly critical to what we do because we believe business can be a force for good. So if we're making this bottle of Tide Laundry Stain Remover, we need folks that can actually produce this on a production line. That you might imagine. We bring in the bottles, we fill the bottles with the laundry stain remover, we wrap the bottles, we put the triggers on, we ship them to Walmart, Target, etc. So that's what we do. and we got in this business to provide light duty manufacturing in the inner city. It was never about second chance, and we call it second chance hiring. We worked very closely with social service industries in the Cincinnati area, really job readiness programs. I think many people, as I see the folks introduce themselves, may be involved in some way, shape, or form in job readiness. Our foray into second chance, fair chance hiring was when one of our job readiness social service partners outlined to us that they, would we hire somebody with a felony on their record? At the time, our founder said, why not? Why not try it? The reason they wanted us to do this was the job readiness social service partners were really tired of training up individuals to get job ready and then having no one offer them a job. They said they were so tired of offering hope when there was no hope. So we jumped in with 2 feet, had our first group of second chance hiring, and we didn't know how big that would become over time. But very quickly, we learned 2 things. One, we learned that our hardest, most trustworthy, most impassioned employees were those that we were offering a second chance. And 2, as Drew mentioned, we needed to provide much more than just a job to help folks get back up on their feet and all about wraparound services. So we knew we had an opportunity here. We now almost exclusively hire fair chance or second chance individuals. Like I said, we have a company of 200, about 140 of those are people that have had a second chance. But we have also invested significantly in wraparound services for our employees. We actually started with a part-time social worker on staff. We now have 3 full-time social workers that help really provide those wraparound benefits. We have 8 pillars of support, everything from transportation to legal to housing to childcare, health and wellness, physical wellness, spiritual wellness, mental wellness. So we know this is critical. And the bottom line is, hopefully there's some business leaders on here. There is the moral case, and Jason talked about the moral case for second chance hiring, no doubt. I want to talk about the business case today. And the business case is, we are a for-profit company, and we'd put our P&L up against any other CPG manufacturer. And the reason for that is our second chance employees, like I said, are the most loyal, hardest working, most tenured employees we've had. Our turnover is 15% on average in manufacturing, in an industry where it's typically 100%. If you talk about the Great Recession, our average tenure of an employee is 5.5 years in light duty manufacturing. We are building careers for folks. We are a promote from within company. So if you come into Nehemiah, we give you an opportunity. You come in and work hard, you're going to be able to grow a career, provide for your family. So I'm thrilled to be here. Obviously passionate about the topic. Love to get in the Q&A, but tons of resources out there. And I hope that folks listening today have an easier time than we have. You can learn from our experiences. So thanks so much for having me.
Eric, thank you to you and Nehemiah so much for leading the way in this conversation and these practices so early on, and really look forward to diving deeper into hearing more about how your business is just like any others, and really implicating that there's no difference between hiring someone who has had a background in justice involvement and someone who has not. Also loved hearing about all the wraparound support services that you provide. You could hear through what Drew was saying, the beginnings of that, and hearing how as an organization you've really embraced that. I'm really excited to dive deeper into that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing from you in just a bit. And with that, we are going to go ahead and transition to Ken Oliver. Ken is the Executive Director of Checker.org, and welcome, Ken. Looking forward to hearing and learning a little bit more alongside you today.
Appreciate you, Jennifer. Before I get started, I wanted to just thank the audience for being here and thank the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative for having me on this esteemed panel. I feel honored and privileged, so thank you for having me. I want to talk about 2 things in my introduction. The first thing is about Checker, the background check company and tech company. I am currently the Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and the Executive Director of Checker.org, which is Checker's philanthropic arm. For those in the audience who don't know about Checker, Checker is a background check company whose company mission is fair chance hiring. That seems kind of counterintuitive, because why would a background check company who is responsible for providing background checks to some of the biggest companies in the world be interested in fair chance hiring? And the answer is relatively simple. What Checker recognized early on when we founded the company in 2014 is that background checks harmed, in a very specific way, people who had criminal records, and specifically Black and brown communities who were harmed by policies that fostered mass incarceration. And so Checker wanted to create a movement and a mission that message that background checks were really a way of being inclusive rather than exclusive. And so it's not necessarily the background check in Checker's mind, it's how we interpret the background check and what that means. So we really thought that there was an opportunity for us to change the narrative about how we look at background checks and how we provide opportunity when we're looking at talent and HR policies, et cetera, and so forth. And so Checker, who's been doing fair chance hiring for about 7 years now, currently has 6% of its 1,200 person workforce are people who are formerly incarcerated or have some type of criminal justice background. And we have a metric for 2025 to have 10% of the company be fair chance hires. And we hope to nationalize with other companies this movement to provide economic opportunity and economic mobility for people who have been disproportionately impacted by the justice system. One of the things that I really love about Checker and respect about Checker is that they do not promote simply an entry-level position fair chance program. They hire up and down the corporate ladder, from software engineers to vice presidents and executive leadership teams like myself. They hire across all lines: customer service, customer experience, engineering, finance, you name it, they do it. And so they really opened up the door for the way that they look at justice impacted talent. We don't look at the background check, we look at the talent that comes to the table. So we try our best as a company to not lower the bar, but we want to lower the barriers for every single person. What's unique about my own story and what I do at Checker is I myself am justice impacted. I served 24 years in prison, did 9 years in solitary confinement, and found myself being released after a huge litigation case against the state of California, and became a policy director in the state, and really saw in the state of California that people who exited incarceration were typically ushered into low service jobs, high labor jobs, the trades, and a lot of other kind of careers that didn't provide economic mobility or access to the middle class economy in the way that we typically think about that. And the reason that that's important is because when we unpack policies behind mass incarceration and recidivism specifically, it's important that we understand what the number one driver of mass incarceration and recidivism is, and that's poverty and lack of access. And so when there's not access provided to technology or the knowledge-based economy or the things that provide economic mobility the most, then you find those economic stressors that happen to people who've been impacted by the justice system increase exponentially, especially in a place like California, where you have San Francisco, one of the most expensive places to live in the world, and places like LA County, where it's simply cost prohibitive to be able to work for minimum wage or $15 or $16 an hour and still be able to provide housing, which Drew called out earlier. Thank you for that, Drew, and some of the other things that allow us to provide for ourselves. So when I came home, I petitioned and spent a lot of time with the California State Legislature and the governor of California, talking about the knowledge-based economy and how the prison system denies access to the things that society has access to, especially when it comes to job skills. In the California prison system, they're still teaching things like lawnmower repair, and there's no disrespect to anybody who might have fixed a lawnmower before, but that isn't exactly a transferable market-driven skill set in today's economy. And so spoke with the governor a lot about how can we provide pathways to market-driven skill sets, the things that are driving the economic market today. And California, I have to give them full credit and kudos that they ended up giving me and my team, 5 guys who served life in prison, $30 million to build out the first residentially based tech training program in the country, which just happened in 2021 and 2022. And it was a result of that work and building these cohort-based learning programs and working with employers, specifically here in Silicon Valley, companies like Google and Oracle and Microsoft, who were great partners for us, that Checker asked me, a directly impacted person, to run their corporate philanthropic efforts to nationalize fair chance hiring across the country. So it's an honor for me as a directly impacted person to be able to provide leadership in this space and to be able to contribute in whatever way I can to these conversations and help raise the bar for the way that we look at justice impacted people and blow the lid off of low expectations and potential and provide them every opportunity to succeed as possible. So thank you.
And Ken, you say it's an honor to be here today. It's an honor to be here alongside you as well. For those of you who may not be aware, the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative is hosting a conference in October. You can learn more about that at our website, but if you'd like to learn more about Ken, beyond what we'll be asking about in the questions later on, he'll be joining us as a speaker at that conference as well. So Ken, thank you so much for your commitment to this cause. I know it's a very personal one for you, but excited to learn a little bit more as we get into some of our panelist questions as well. And I just want to say to the audience as well, you'll notice a little bit of a theme here. We purposely chose organizations that are just starting out, organizations that are in the middle of their journey, and organizations that have a large amount of influence in this space so that we can hear from people who have done a variety of things in this space in fair chance hiring. And as I invite Eric and Drew to join us back on camera so that we could go back, so we're going to go through some panelist questions that we have prepared for them. I also just want to give a reminder to the audience out there to go ahead and start putting some questions and answers. If you do not want to ask them out loud in the chat pod, you can enter them anonymously in the Q&A pod. Also, I'll be tracking in the chat pod as well. So we have some sets questions that we have prepared. And then in the last 15-20 minutes, we're going to get to the group's questions. So if you don't see us getting to them right away, don't worry, we will get to them, I promise. But to get us started, this question is directed towards Eric and Ken, specifically because your organizations do a lot more work around recruitment and hiring, where Drew is working specifically with work release programming. Eric, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. How does your organization approach recruitment of individuals who have criminal records or justice involvement?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really evolves from what I mentioned before with partnering with the social service agencies in the greater Cincinnati area. We are blessed here in Cincinnati to have around 15 or 20 really core partners that do referrals. And I think that's my call to people. If you're starting out, you want to do what Drew's doing. Step one is get connected with people who are already boots on the ground. And at least in Cincinnati, I think in most major cities, there is an excellent network of social service agencies. So that's what we do. We get connected with reentry, but also, unfortunately, drugs and alcohol go hand in hand a lot of times with incarceration. So if there's any type of rehabilitation, mental health rehabilitation, et cetera, we partner with those nonprofits. They then bring people to us. I will say at this point, 14 years in, we have a tremendous amount of just word of mouth. Folks incarcerated or leaving prison or jail know to come to us directly. We've also, about 4 years ago, started a partnership actually advertising locally on local TV to get that out. But I mean, really, there's a lot of word of mouth because unfortunately, there are not enough companies doing what we do. So a lot of people come to us organically as well. And so then what we do is when we get a referral, either somebody coming direct, someone emailing us, someone stopping by, we have applications. People stop by all the time, fill them out and drop them in. Then we have weekly onboardings and assessments. So I think that's the other thing that I want to highlight is once we get a referral, the next key step is we have our social service team, our 3 on-site social workers. They actually will do an assessment of the individual's job readiness because that is the key piece. Some people are going to leave prison or jail and be immediately job ready. We can plug people in as soon as that week. But that assessment is so critical because if folks are not job ready, instead of kind of getting in and fizzling out and fading quickly, we then send them back and refer them to a job readiness program, again, with the network of social services. So those are the two key things. And it's all about How do you partner locally? How do you do the assessment to ensure job readiness? And I always tell any of our family members, everything I learned in kindergarten. Show up on time, work well with others, work hard. You're going to be fine here at Nehemiah. And believe it or not, I think that's true for almost any company.
If you guys know me, you know that I forget to unmute myself at least 6 times in any session. So chalk that up as number 1. Be prepared for future ones. Eric, thank you for making some gestures to let me know. Eric, what I was saying, getting back to the point, is that loved hearing about how you guys have social workers available for your team members, thinking about wraparound supports. I already see some questions coming into the chat pod about how do businesses support, what type of wraparound supports are needed. So we'll dive into that a little bit deeper later. But just want to put a note to any businesses that might be on the call. Even if your organization is not in a place where they could hire social workers to provide wraparound supports directly, I guarantee you there's plenty of community-based organizations that would be willing to help and support you in doing that as well. So although Eric's demonstrating a gold standard here of what we'd advocate for happening in regards to wraparound supports, don't think that it's something that is unreachable for you. And with that, Kim, we're going to go ahead and transition and love to hear a little bit more about your experience with hiring and recruitment of individuals who've been impacted by the justice system.
I appreciate that, Jennifer. And Eric, thank you for such a thoughtful response that you gave. It's really hard to follow you because much of what we do just like you do. And I know Jason will be very proud of me to say community-based organizations. That's typically who we partner with across the country. Checker has corporate headquarters in Orlando, Florida, and Denver, Colorado, and in San Francisco. And we partner heavily with what we call our mission partners in those particular communities. And generally speaking, word of mouth around the country, people know about Checker as being a fair chance hiring tech company. And so when people are interested and they look on job boards like Honest Jobs, et cetera, they kind of already know that there's an opportunity probably for a person if they're job ready at Checker. Unlike what Nehemiah does, we don't have an assessment program. We really have an analyzation program based on our hiring committee. Once a person applies for a job at Checker, we try to look at their life experience because we recognize people that have been in prison for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in some cases may not necessarily have the typical skill sets that a tech company might look at. So we kind of look at what did you do in prison? What are some of the programs that you got involved with? What were some of the things that you did prior to going to prison? And then we try to make matches with transferable skills for a particular job position. And that's kind of how we analyze it once a person applies. I think it's really impactful to spend time with your local community-based organizations and telling those community-based organizations about what your needs are. And if you have the resources to do it, help those community-based organizations get people's job ready by providing them resources, specifically small grants through your volunteer program with your employees. I can say from personal experience that when I was a policy director, I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of huge tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area and talked to them about apprenticeship programs and internship programs. And the very first question that they asked me was, what kind of baseline skills do these folks have that you want us to hire and create a program around? And, I was very forthright and I said, most people who've done 15 or 20 years in prison haven't seen a smartphone before. They've never heard of a Google Drive or, some of the other basic things. They've never paid a bill or accessed a bank account using a mobile phone. And so, they encouraged me and I took them up on the invitation to really provide skill building training for formerly incarcerated people, both at the community-based organization level, but then also at the company level. So at Checker, what we recently did is launch Checker University, where we're developing a platform that's going to provide cohort-based learning for not just justice impacted people in California, but justice impacted people all across the country. So people who have the aptitude and the drive and the moxie to want to take things to the next level, you can come on in a peer-friendly community. You can learn these skill sets that you need to access these points, and then we'll actually match them not only with our own job openings, but with our partner tech companies that we partner with and some of our customers who are looking to get involved with fair chance hiring. So it's really a both and, right? It's looking with the community-based organizations. And then if you see community-based organizations maybe only providing soft skills, for example, like resume writing and interview, then there is an opportunity for us to fill in the gaps. And I would encourage, companies who are on the call to be creative about getting engaged with local policy, to ask, boards of supervisors and state legislators to provide funding for companies to provide training as well if they want to create an ecosystem and source talent from within.
And thank you so much for that. And lots of, you're creating great segues for me later on, because we're going to be talking about wraparound supports and the role of community-based organizations. But for right now, I want to transition to Drew. We haven't heard from you in a while, and want to talk about the theme of production and results. When you're working with the individuals who are going through the work release programming, earlier you mentioned in terms of how they've impacted the production at your organization and the positive role of that. My question was going to be, are people who are impacted by the justice system, are they producing your desired results? But you've already answered that question. Could you share a little bit about how deeply they've impacted your organization? And if there's any differentiating factors that might make individuals with justice involvement a better fit for your organization, or have a different experience on how they contribute to your organization?
Yeah, I think just like Eric hit on a little bit earlier, and maybe it's because of the line of work that our businesses are in the assembly and manufacturing. We just get a lot of guys that are way more motivated than your average guy filling that position. So, we had 6 years or so where we weren't dealing with this population coming out of the correctional facility, and it contrasts pretty heavily with the last 2 years. And the guys seem to be extremely motivated, extremely loyal. They want to just keep showing up for you. And in our situation, we have a lot of guys that would want to stay on if that was possible, which that's a different topic. But we have guys that, really want to stay on and keep that trajectory in their life going. And we have doubled since we started working with the Take Two program. And honestly, we had a guy that was running our shop 2 years ago, and he had some health issues and had to leave the state. And it worked out perfectly where one of my guys was getting out of on statutory release, was releasing, and he decided to stay in the community. He was one of my better guys that we had, and he ended up staying on, and he now runs our shop, and he is kind of the guy that's in charge of all of our production and in charge of the doubling of our production over the last 2 years. So would we have gotten there without him? I don't think so. Would we have gotten there without working with this program? I know that's probably a no. It's in the last 2 years, it's also the hiring process has changed for a lot of companies, I think, with COVID and a lot of the things that had happened. And this has been a really steady group of guys that they just want to show up and work. I almost have to slow them down a little bit and make sure that they're getting rest, because these guys would work 7 days a week. And the other thing that's really interesting is we're filling a lot of entry-level jobs just based on what we do. And you'll interview these guys, you'll talk to them, and yeah, this guy sounds great, let's bring him in, we'll hire him. And then 3 weeks into them working there, you're like, man, this guy's, he's a certified welder and a fabricator. Like, why are we having him just stacking steaks on the end of the line? Like, get over here and fix some machines. And so I would say that the skill set of a lot of these guys has blown me away. And I've just been surprised by that. I don't know if that's been your experience, Eric, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me anymore. And I can hit that in interviews and I can draw that out. But man, the first year I was just shocked at the skill sets that these guys have.
Thank you, Drew. And Eric, Drew kind of set me up for a segue there. How has your business been impacted by people who, I mean, you talked earlier, clearly you guys have grown a lot. But could you talk a little bit about what that growth has felt like and if there had been any differentiating factors from your employees that are not impacted by the justice system?
Yeah, I think just reiterate what I said before, and really what Drew's saying is this is an underserved, underrepresented part of the population. And if you have 1 in 3 U.S. adults with a criminal conviction and they have barriers, you start to remove those barriers, you give people an opportunity, they're gonna run through walls for you. And I'll tell you, in a world where, and if you want my point of view, the Great Recession, everything else, frankly, America needs to know how to get back to work. And I'll tell you, this is a population of folks through the pandemic. We didn't miss a day, missed 0 days, and we're able to beat our competitors who are often out of stock. I'm sure you've all been at grocery store, been at Target, Walmart, and see empty shelves. You know, we weren't empty. We kept producing when other people couldn't produce. And again, we did not get the questions. People wanted to come to work even through the harshest times of the pandemic. Were willing to comply with all the, you know, social distancing and mask wearing, just a group of people that were hungry to contribute and add value. And I think the compounding interest of that is not only great for our P&L, because we've now had business, you know, in the building brands piece that I own, we now have distribution at given retailers we wouldn't have because we were able to stay in stock. But more so, you can groom. What Drew says is absolutely true. And now over a company of 200 people, we've seen it happen 20 times. Our head of our whole manufacturing operation for a $60 million company came to us as a second chance employee. He now manages 100 people. We've promoted him 14 times, 14. And it's unbelievable. And I think there's just the power of the human condition and the capacity at a time when employees are wanting to work less and less and have less loyalty to companies. Our loyalty and passion and growth and wanting to grow is at an all-time high. So I just feel like the talent issues I hear all my peers talk about, we're not facing those issues. So now's the time, and the barriers have never been lower.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And Ken, thanks for pitch hitting for me in the chat pod there. Eric is based in Cincinnati. And Drew, do you have something else to add before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, the other thing that I found interesting is from a production standpoint, these guys almost police themselves. They love the opportunity, and they will not let anybody come into the fold, so to speak, and mess that up for them. So when some guys come in that are brand new, and because of how we do it, we have crazy amounts of turnover. I mean, we have, like I said, 8 guys, and I've hired over 50 of them in the last 2.5 years. So we see guys maybe for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. And these guys that are coming in and maybe they've only got 3 months and they're just like, well, this is better than prison. I'm just gonna, buy my time. The guys don't let that happen. So it's been really interesting to watch. They really require a higher standard of work from their peers, which has been just kind of a fun thing to watch happen.
Yeah, and I can't help but build on that. So we've now done this over 14 years, right? And we're promote from within. So is it more credible if your manager, your supervisor, your career coach at Nehemiah has a similar background to you, or if somebody like me does it? I think it's that ability, number one, sets a standard, sets a goal for folks to go. And we call everybody family members. We're the Nehemiah family, and we respect the name of Nehemiah and what we're trying to do. I mean, first question I got for a year after leaving Procter & Gamble was, do I feel safe at work? Okay. And I just want to tell everybody out there, if I get that question is asked to me now, I'm offended. I'm personally offended because I think it speaks to just the ignorance that people have and the community we have and people building each other up. It's amazing to hear what Drew's going through in a different state, at a different life cycle of a business. This is a model that works, and it works in any given situation. So that's awesome.
Eric, I might hire you to host the next thought leadership series here.
Hey, whatever you need, let's do it.
You're setting me up really well. One, holy moly, that person was promoted 14 times. That's an
We have to like create new titles because he keeps going farther than he ever dreamed possible.
But I just want, for a moment, I want to guide us back to the theme of wraparound support. So when Drew and I were first meeting, he talked a bunch about the barriers that his company faces being in a small Colorado town, specifically about housing, and how that impacts the ability for some of his workers to stick around and help support his business, even if they want to, right? And we have a lot of attendees on the call today who come from community-based organizations. And so this is kind of a dual purpose question that I'm going to pose to the group, specifically Eric and Ken, just because you're a little bit more advanced. How do you partner with community-based organizations, and what role do those providers at community-based organizations play for your employees? And do you have any advice for people who may be working at those community-based organizations on how to engage with businesses and help them become more accepting and understanding about not just that this is for social good, but the value that it can bring to their own business?
Yeah,
I don't mind taking. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken. You go, Ken. I've been talking
I was going to say,
I
don't mind taking a first stab. Call Eric. That's what I'm going to tell everybody, right? Call Eric and do the stuff that they're doing. Because after listening to Eric, I feel like I wanted to go work for Nehemiah Manufacturing and work for Eric, right? Where do I sign up? Community-based organizations, Jennifer, play a very, very important role. But I want to support community-based organizations in a way that people don't often talk about. Community-based organizations are funded by resources and philanthropy, sometimes the state, sometimes grants. And oftentimes we take for granted the work that they do. It's not a love of money, it's a love of labor that community-based organizations do. And they really, really, really need all of our support, and for us to evangelize the support necessary, because they are the boots on the ground, the frontline people that help us get the things we need at Nehemiah, at Checker, and all of the other wonderful companies that are engaged in fair chance hiring. So for us, what we do is we do a lot of community-based events with our community-based partners, where we volunteer, we go in and do trainings, we do interview simulations, we have a reentry simulation that we do regularly. We go into prisons and speak to people who are incarcerated with community-based organizations to build those relationships and understand the work that they're doing and finding out where we can provide value. For the community-based organizations, I've been evangelizing this for a couple of years, and I'm just going to double click it here. It's very, very important that we think holistically, and it's very, very important that we think from a human-centered lens. I can't stress to you enough the weight of what happens for a person who doesn't have a support system, who's done 20 years in prison, and then they're thrown out with $100 of gate money and said, here, go to the Bay Area in California, go to LA County, or go to Houston or one of the other major cities where the cost of living is outrageous, and say, go fend for yourself. The stressors, the societal stressors, the social stressors, the economic stressors can beat people down psychologically. And so removing a lot of those stressors by being able to provide dignified housing, right? And what is dignified housing? Housing doesn't mean putting 5 guys in a 1-bedroom on bunk beds and repeating what happens in prison. Because if you put 4 or 5 guys in 1 bedroom out here in society, that's what it looks like in prison. So you're not providing dignity, you're not providing space to be able to transform and transition. You're repeating things that have already traumatized us once we're in. So looking at things like providing dignified housing, looking at things like providing people stipends or economic subsidies while they go through a learning process, which may not be as big of an issue maybe in manufacturing, frontline manufacturing, but in other type of industries, there has to be a learning curve to be able to allow people to get the skills necessary. And it's very, very difficult to work a full-time job and upskill at the same time to put yourself in position to get your own apartment where rent is outrageous and all the other things that are kind of outrageous. So For community-based organizations, I would say, let's look at things holistically. Let's look at all the things needed to get a person from prison gate to the key to their own apartment, a turnkey situation. And what are all the things inside of that we need to do to support that man or that woman? I heard someone earlier ask about women. And before I turn it over, I'll just say that, at Checker, gender equity is very important. Women are the fastest growing people in the prison population in America. A lot of people don't know that. And when they come back into the community, they're often pushed into service trades and things that don't provide them a lot of economic mobility. And we fail when we don't talk about the economic empowerment of women, because most women who go to prison have children and families and don't have the same type of access to supports that men typically may have. And so it's important to flag that. So whoever in the audience said something about the women, appreciate that, and wanted to emphasize that. Eric?
Yeah, I got to build on that, because Ken that was awesome. And I will say, unfortunately, the mass incarceration in our society spans race, gender, age, creed. We always talk about diversity at Nehemiah, and we have every different background you could ever imagine in leadership and in background. So, it's incredible. I would say our supervisory leadership roles are about 50-50 men and women. And it's unfortunately mass incarceration hits everybody. I think what Ken said is spot on. What Drew's been saying is spot on. So I think the through line here to me is incredible. And I would build on actually a comment Ken made in his introduction is the average person returning from prison or jail has 3 to 4 barriers. Okay. 3 to 4. My ignorance before I joined Nehemiah was, hey, give somebody a job and then it's theirs to either go for it or not. And if somebody doesn't want to take advantage of a job, kind of shame on them. And I think that's how society's treated folks for a long time. That's really easy to say from the sidelines. When you get in the arena, what you'll realize is a lot of those barriers are significant. If you have a housing barrier, you have a child care barrier, you have a transportation barrier, good luck. You're one flat tire away or one bus ride miss away from losing your job. And then, that person didn't care. I have a hard time with that. So the human-centered approach that Ken mentioned is 100% spot on. And to that, 2 things I think need to be true. Number one, human-centric is absolutely right. And you got to get to know and give individual care to each person. And it has to be wraparound, because if I solve one barrier, another one might pop up. So that's what we're focused on. Whether we do that in-house with social workers or whether you work outside, that has to happen. And I want to speak a little bit harshly to some social service partners is I think it is way too siloed. I think it is way too siloed today. And the social service agencies that are going to win because you're all applying for the same grant money or the same philanthropic money. The winners are going to be the folks that decide to work together against a part, because those that can get to know individuals and provide wraparound and referral services and have less competition for grants or for philanthropy are going to be the ones that win. So, that's my challenge. If you're sitting there and you're writing for the same grant money, same donors, you got to think bigger and you got to work together, because those are the ones, at least in our community, that are the most helpful. And the last one, my own personal penchant, is during COVID, a lot of social service agencies let us down. Transparently, like I said, we didn't miss a day. We saw a lot of social service shut down. And at the worst time, we want to talk about mental health crisis. You want to talk about criminal justice crisis and COVID. Yeah, that's going to happen when you shut down services for 6 months, a year, 2 years. So sorry, a little rose and thorn there, but had to say it.
My team will tell you I'm a big fan of rose and thorns. We got to keep it real. And we were going to talk about retention strategies, but I think this whole conversation has been so fruitful, mentioning different types of retention strategies already. And I really want to get to the questions of everyone else. But Eric, I was just curious because there's one statistic that I really wanted you to share. Could you share what your turnover rate is at Nehemiah?
Yeah, our turnover is 15% in an industry of 100%. So, and put numbers to that, okay? To onboard a family member costs us $3,000. So if we have 200 and we turn over 200 in a year, that's easy math, right? That's a lot of money. We couldn't sustain our P&L. So, that's an unbelievable turnover rate in this environment today.
Okay. And also, Eric, I have to tell a quick story. Just in reflection of what you shared about social services providers. I don't know if most people on this call even realize how the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative was originated. And it's exactly what you were describing. And I really loved how you put it. Um, every one of us on the steering committee are from 5 different organizations who are all aiming for the same grant funding. We are actually funded for the same grant back in 2017. And we came together because we were unhappy about some of the ways that our funder was addressing our programming and chose to start advocating together. And that was the genesis of the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative. So it was taking that first step together and working together on one single issue that has grown into something this big and this influential. And if we can do it, you can do it as well. And we've all been able to maintain our programming in some capacity, one way or another. And we all support each other in a lot of different capacities as well. So Eric, just thank you for highlighting that. I think that's a really important part, that for one of us to succeed, we all succeed, even if we are competitors. So with that, I do want to ask everyone, before we get to the questions from the audience, what is one piece of advice that you could leave us with? And we'll start with Drew, Ken, and Eric for organization. And this could be geared towards a community-based organization or for organizations that are just starting out with second chance hiring. What's one piece of advice that you have? And Drew, we'll start with you and then go to Eric and then finish up with Ken.
Yeah, mine is super simple in theory, but I just feel like you have to have a lot of grace. And I think I had just misconceptions all around, and I feel like I probably still have them every once in a while. But I think when these guys, for me, I'm watching them succeed while incarcerated, but coming to work is a pretty good option for them. And so the moment they step out the door is when all those things that I mentioned earlier start to hit, and they pile on, and you have no time to prepare for them, and you have them being able to make their own decisions for the first time in a long time. And so even Jacob, who runs our shop now, I watched him go from running our shop incarcerated to having a week off to get some stuff in order, and just watching him make bad decisions, and then bad decisions based on his bad decisions, and just how that would pile up. And he came back and he figured things out, and we had a good enough relationship where he was able to call and talk through that stuff. And but man, like, I think if I was just an employer without any grace that I could extend to him, like, he'd be done. Like, I'd just say, you know what, like, this isn't going to work. And since then, I mean, you guys have heard the story of what he's done for our company. And I think that grace is for sure worth it, but you have to enter that with some grace.
Thank you, Drew. Eric, what wise words could you share with us?
I by the way, Drew, we call it HR with grace. Same deal. Love that. So I'll go with you got to be all in. We've talked to a myriad of companies, and you cannot dip your toe into fair chance, second chance hiring. You cannot say, let's go try it with one person. Let's go take a pocket of our organization. The whole organization has to embrace this 110%. If not, you're going to fail. Because it has to touch everything that you do. It's not a program, it's not a test market. You got to go all in. And that's why we actually, as we started to go national with our messaging, we will only interact with decision makers in companies. So I got to tell you, if you're running a social service agency, if you're trying to get this in your company, do not stop until you have audience with the decision maker in your company, whoever that is, likely C-suite and below. Because they've got to buy in and go all in. Because if you don't do that, you're going to fail.
Thank you, Eric. Ken, we'll let you have the final words, and then we'll head into questions from the audience.
Sure. Thanks. First, I wanted to just thank Eric and Drew for their thoughtful answers. And I'm going to provide just a little bit of a different lens, just from a DE&I inclusion perspective. I mean, we hear these conversations every day. And what I like to share with people is that you don't have an inclusion strategy in your company if you're excluding a third of the American workforce. You can't, it's like being pregnant, either you are or you're not. It's like you can't be half in and half out. And so if you consider yourself and you're engaging in the rhetoric of, oh, we want to be inclusive, we want to do all these things, and you haven't instituted a culture, to Eric's point, that says the baseline for our inclusion strategy are the most vulnerable workers in America, then you just don't have one. And I would add, from an asset-based perspective, is that if you can muster up the courage to embrace that cultural shift, that change management, if you will, then all of your other DEI strategies fall like dominoes, because the toughest lift and the heaviest lift is fair chance. The other thing I would just want to go back to humanizing, because people always ask me, like, how do you deal with fair chance people? Just by treating them like everybody else. Like, one of the issues that plague people who have a criminal record in this country is this scarlet letter and this kind of culture we've created in America that creates a second-class citizenry. So just by having a culture of belonging, where you treat people the same way that they treat people without a criminal record, you embrace them and support them and lift them up. I mean, I know it's probably a crazy notion, but the more you do that, the more you get out of people. The more you exclude people and the more that you marginalize people in general in human nature, the results usually aren't that great. And so the kind of cultures that Nehemiah has put together, the kind of cultures that Drew is putting together, are the things that I would advise companies to continue to do, to normalize this thing and make this, something that we look at 10 or 15 years from now is just a funny thing that we did. Same thing with the civil rights movement, and when we didn't let women work and we didn't let this. It's just something that we have to continually normalize. And so it's a marathon, not a sprint. But if we're intentional about what we do every single day, being educated about what is driving mass incarceration, not good versus bad in most cases, right? And there are those exceptions. It's not good people, bad people, those people, this people. It's just about people at the end of the day. Some people have made mistakes. Some people have gotten caught for those mistakes. And just my final thought is about the way that we approach innovation, which I'm sure, both of my colleagues here understand, is in business, especially in technology, we teach fail fast, fail 1,000 times in order to get to a successful result, but we don't extend that same type of grace to human and social problems. And so I think that if we can open up and extend that same type of grace to humans who fail and give them the opportunity to get to the point where they're succeeding, I think we're going to win every time. It's a win-win proposition.
Thank you so much for Ken. And bringing back that human-centered approach is so important and key if you're an employer or if you're a community-based organization, no matter what your role is. So we're going to go ahead and transition to questions from the audience. Eric, there is a question earlier on that I'm going to ask you to answer in the chat pod if you don't mind. They're looking for more information about what your assessment is like in the beginning. So if you, I think that's one that we could kind of just address in the chat pod if you don't mind. And there's a couple questions all around the same theme here about how do you dispel the naysayers about second chance hiring? How do you destigmatize an environment for individuals who are impacted by the justice system? And, how do you inspire your employers to take this leap? How do you get those people C-suite and above, or well, you can't go above the C-suite, but C-suite and below, sorry about that. How do you get them ready to embrace this? And so this isn't directed towards any one of our panelists, but in general, the three questions really are: how do you dispel the naysayers? How do you destigmatize the work environment for people impacted by the justice system? And how do you get your team on board so that you can fully embrace this initiative?
I'll take a first shot at the naysayer piece, just because I don't address the naysayers. I address the yay-sayers. So I focus my time on how to convince the people that I know may have an aptitude to say yes. And then I just talk about the facts. I give context. And most importantly, I can't stress to everybody enough, storytelling. Telling the stories of everyday people. When I was a policy director, the senators used to tell me all the time, they said, Ken, you know every statistic about criminal justice that exists, and we appreciate and love that, and I love the one-pagers and all of that. But if you want me to convince the person that's on the other side of the aisle to get a vote, you got to bring me a story. You got to bring me of how this is impacting communities. You got to bring me the person that's going to come up there and say how this impacted their family and their life, et cetera. And so any opportunity that we have to be able to tell stories, to be able to share not just the facts with the decision makers, right? And provide, to what Eric said earlier, the business case, the social case about why mass incarceration is bad for business and bad for communities, and how when you hire people and give people the dignity and the opportunity to work and earn a livable wage, you're healing communities, you're increasing your bottom line in business. As I said earlier, it's a win-win for the community, the business, and the entire country. So that's how I talk to the yay-sayers, not the naysayers, because there's always going to be naysayers. There's naysayers about everything in this country, and we spend so much energy and time trying to convince people who may never say yes, right? Focus on the yay-sayers.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. I think it's all about what's the way in. I always talk about marketing. What's the way in? Today's way in is wide open. People need talent. People can't staff what they need. So this is a creative solution to a staffing need. So that's number one. Number two is, if you're looking for what Ken is talking about, you can send me a note, go to our website, check us out. We have a Harvard business case, 20 pages, vetted by Harvard, that shows this is good for business. We have a TED Talk. We have the videos. It's all done, okay? We also founded a nonprofit called the Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. All the resources, if you want to do what Ken's looking for and you can't get Ken and me to come speak, or people that we know, it's all digitized and it's all ready for you. So it's like on a platter. So that's what I would do. But I wanted to talk about the stigmatization of that. I will tell you, going all in as a business leader, I do not know. Only about 3 people in our organization of 200 know if someone has a criminal record or not. And that's how you have to change the game. You cannot have, these are our second chance employees, these are our regular employees. They have to be your family members. And I don't even know. And the only reason I know some of our stories is people have proactively provided them to us. So I think you just have to look at people, to Ken's earlier point, as people, as humans, and stop talking about their past. Because I've got a past too. It just doesn't happen to be Google searchable. So I think that's the reality. If you want to destigmatize it, it's all about humanizing. Ken, I think, nailed that.
I think you kind of hit on it. What I was going to say, Eric, as far as we're primed for this right now, because as somebody that's in charge of pushing your business forward, if you are saying that an empty slot is more important than giving somebody a shot at filling that spot, like that, it's incredibly frustrating for me. But on the, I think that's where the opportunity is. And it's the opportunity, obviously, for growing your company in that way, but also the opportunity to tell people that are in charge of making those decisions, like, hey, is this spot important enough to fill with somebody that needs a shot? And I think that you can grow it from there. And I think you can just dip your toe in the water to get started and start to see it. But I think very quickly you'll realize that you don't want to stay there. But I've watched it here with just some lumber companies and some other guys that have tried it, and they brought in a forklift driver, and now they're begging for people. So I have seen that grow very, very quickly. I don't think you can stay there permanently, but yeah, that's all I would say on that.
Thank you. So we have a question here, and I don't typically read them word for word, but I think that the way that it was phrased was really wonderful. It's directed towards what Eric was saying about people saying hurtful comments about if you feel safe. So it says, I've noticed that there's a fine balance in creating awareness and educating people in a gentle manner where they still stay interested and engaged. It's a fine line. How do you field questions from the people who ask if you feel safe? Now, there's some of us who have the privilege of not feeling personally impacted by that. There's some of us who don't have that privilege because they fall into a different category or label or whatnot. But in general, how do you address that so that we as a group can continue to gain momentum and help create more chances for individuals who fall into that that fair chance hiring category, and help continue to elevate them and help continue to elevate our society as we do that as well?
I mean, I could say, I'm sure my colleagues can build. I mean, to me, it's all about confronting ignorance. And it's like any other ignorance that exists in the world, is you can either get angry or you can provide data. So I choose to Drew's point, to use grace at this point. I guess depending on the level of friendship I have, if I was a personal friend, I'd be like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Like, but if it's somebody that may be asking me, unfortunately, 1 in 3, adults have a criminal record, but it's not evenly distributed, right? Is the problem. So your worldview may be different from my worldview. I tend to have a different worldview now because of where I live and work. So I think that's fine, but I just rebut that with stats. I'll give you 2 stats. One, we are in manufacturing, right? And we have a vast majority of fair chance, second chance employees. And I would argue we have less HR issues than the traditional manufacturing, warehousing, distribution company. So we have less issues to a lot of what Drew was talking about with kind of the self-policing, and this is what the Nehemiah family does. So I'll give you another one because this is a fun stat. The state of Ohio created something called a CQE, or the Certificate of Qualified Employment. And this was to rebut leaders of companies essentially saying, insurance won't let me hire a felon. I might be liable if something happens. So the state of Ohio created a CQE. People returning from prison or jail could apply. And thus, if I were to hire somebody with a CQE, it would prevent a company from being liable in the court of law. Okay. Sounds great. Let's rebut this fear, this insurance. I'm not afraid. It's insurance, right? Let's knock all these barriers one by one. You know how many times a CQE's been used in a criminal defense of a company? Zero. We're creating things for no reason. So it's educating the uninformed and uninvolved.
All right, Eric, I can't agree with you more. If you look at it on a larger scale with the federal bonding program, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, we don't have much time, so please Google that. A very similar scenario, but on a national basis, they've only had 4 cases across the country that have come to be actually challenging or taking advantage of that insurance, right? And only 1 has been founded nationally across the board since it's been instituted. So to wrap it up, I think that Eric kind of brings up a great point about data and weaving that data into your storytelling as well. We're just about out of time today. There are tons of comments in here celebrating each of you gentlemen who've chosen to be here today. So thank you for your time. I do want to go ahead and set up us to put out a poll to see how you believe the session went. And as we're setting up that poll, I want to talk about some opportunities that are coming up in the future. So if you've been on for the whole session, you know that the National Reentry Workforce Collaborative is having our first ever conference in Bethesda in October. To learn more about that, you can visit our website or register at the NRWC.org. That links in the chat a couple different times for a couple different reasons. There you'll be able to see people like Ken as speak as well. So we'll see Ken there. Also, want to remind you about our next Thought Leadership Series. That will be September 2nd, Friday, 1 o'clock. Always that first Friday of the 3rd month of the quarter at 1 p.m. Please save that date. More information about a topic will be forthcoming. And before we leave today, just so much gratitude and appreciation for Eric, Ken, Drew. They have all volunteered a lot of time to prepare to be here today with us today, a lot of work behind the scenes. And this wouldn't be possible if people like you weren't out there being advocates and helping us along the way. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And as you log off, you'll get that survey coming up. Please fill it out so that we can get some feedback. Thank you so much.